My name is Elise Hartley. I'm 34 years old, and for the past 5 years, I've worked as a senior market insights analyst at Lunaris Retail Systems, a legacy retail chain that stretches across the Midwest and Southern states. On paper, I was part of a growing analytics team. In reality, I was the one quietly holding the entire merchandising strategy together, slide by slide, number by number, while others spoke louder and stood taller in the room. That morning, I sat in the corner of the glass-walled conference room, notebook open, listening silently as our director of merchandising, Brett Langford, clasped hands with my colleague, Miles Turner. Brett's voice was booming, full of performative praise. "This is the kind of strategic thinking we need, Miles. Visionary, calculated, bold." I didn't flinch, but inside I felt a cold shift, because the bold, visionary strategy Miles had just presented to the executive team, the one that was going to be rolled out across 12 states next quarter, was mine. Every slide, every graph, every predictive model. Mine. The same strategy that had driven a 22% seasonal lift in our test markets. The same methodology I developed over the course of 6 months, built from scratch using customer segmentation matrices, competitive pricing, flows, and regional behavior mapping. And yet Miles was now shaking hands with directors. And I was still sitting at the end of the table, the supporting analyst. A month ago, he had asked if I wanted to collaborate on the holiday merchandising project. Said he respected my analytical skills and wanted to learn the deeper mechanics of my process. I believed him. I was stupid enough to hand over everything. I gave him access to my raw survey data, my promotional heat map model, even my annotated prototype decks, the ones with strategic notes I hadn't yet shared with anyone else. I didn't realize then that I was handing him a blueprint, not a partnership. As Brett wrapped up the meeting with glowing praise, he announced it in front of everyone. Effective immediately, Miles will be promoted to Senior Merchandising Strategist. He'll be overseeing rollout across all major metro regions. Elise, great work supporting him. Keep the insights flowing. I smiled. I even nodded, but my pen pressed harder into the notebook, and the lines between the words blurred with something darker. This wasn't just a stolen idea. This was the moment I knew I was being erased. The meeting ended. Applause filled the room, for him, and people filed out with coffee cups and congratulatory smiles. Miles stayed behind, basking in his promotion glow like it was earned. I stayed seated for a few seconds longer than everyone else, letting the silence return. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was calculating. Back at my desk, I opened my drawer. Inside were 2 things no one ever noticed: a gray moleskin journal and a USB drive. The journal held everything I didn't put in company emails: my raw notes, ideas, timelines, even questions I had about the leadership's decisions. The USB, it held local backups of the analytics frameworks I'd personally developed over the last 2 years. Let's be clear, I never violated company policy. But when your insight work underpins $42 million annual revenue, you get careful. Especially in a place like Lunaris, where the louder voices get the credit and the quieter ones do the building. That evening, I sat in my apartment in downtown Lexington, staring at the award on my shelf. Analyst of the Year, 2022. A plaque no one in leadership even mentioned today. My phone buzzed. A message from Kara, one of the other female analysts on my team. "That was your strategy, wasn't it? I'm so sorry, Elise." I didn't reply, not because I wasn't grateful, but because I couldn't afford sympathy yet. The next morning, Miles was already in his new glass-walled office. He waved at me like we were teammates. He even mouthed, "Let's grab lunch." He was oblivious. In the days that followed, I did everything I was asked: clean, sharp dashboards, predictive models, regional breakdowns, and every time he shared them with the board, he said, "My team's analysis confirms we're on the right track." My team. He hadn't hired a single person. He just had me. But something shifted on Thursday. I received a LinkedIn message from a recruiter named Tina Marshall, writing on behalf of a fast-growing retail disruptor based in Atlanta, Nexa Core Markets. Hi, Elise. Your profile caught our attention, especially your work on regional pricing elasticity. We're expanding aggressively into new metro areas and would love to talk about a strategic analyst role. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't respond right away, not because I wasn't interested, but because I had an idea, not revenge. Proof. I wasn't going to speak up. I was going to build something undeniable. That week, I kept acting like nothing had changed at Lunaris. While Miles presented my models as if they were his strategy, I slowly began retreating inward. But that retreat, it wasn't defeat. It was preparation. I delivered every report, every visualization model with precision. But I also saved a copy of everything, secured in my own encrypted folders. Not just what I did, but how I did it. Every step, every logic chain, documented. I'd been quiet for years because I was analyzing, and this time, I wasn't just analyzing data, I was studying the rot within the company itself. On Wednesday morning, Miles was doing a presentation, run-through. I could see him through the office glass, jacket on, standing in front of a screen, explaining strategy to a few junior analysts, using my words, my terminology, my framework. But this time, something was different. For the first time, someone was missing. Me. I wasn't invited to observe the session. No one asked for my notes, because apparently now he had his own strategy, and soon he'd face the real test, the market. Right at that moment, I replied to Tina Marshall on LinkedIn. Hi, Tina. Thank you for your message. I may be open to new opportunities. I'd love to discuss the details. 15 minutes later, her response arrived. Fantastic. We'd love to have you in Nexa's merchandising strategy division. Could you send over your resume and any sample work you'd like to share? That night, with a cup of coffee in hand, I built a portfolio folder made up entirely of my own projects. It wasn't just slide decks. It held commentary, forecasting models, strategic recommendations, algorithmic insights. Everything that actually mattered. And I made sure of one thing. I only included the original work Miles had never touched. I wasn't trying to expose anyone. I wanted to prove something. Friday at lunch, I stepped out of the office and sat in my car. I knew something was about to shift. But first, I needed to witness one more scene. That day, Miles's name appeared in an internal company newsletter. The visionary behind Q4's success, Miles Turner. Again, I was there. But not by name. That's when I made my decision. It was time to build our own stage. The weekend was quiet, deliberately so. I turned off notifications, stayed off Slack, and ignored every friendly follow-up email Miles sent asking for input on his Q4 rollout. Instead, I focused entirely on one thing, preparing for my interview with Nexa Core Markets. By Sunday afternoon, I had assembled a full portfolio that walked through my methodology, case studies, regional results, and custom merchandising frameworks. None of it confidential, but all of it mine. When I walked into Nexa's Atlanta HQ on Tuesday morning, it felt like stepping into another universe. Glass walls, buzzing teams, and zero politics in sight. Director Margot Rayner, head of strategic merchandising, greeted me with a firm handshake and direct eyes. No fluff, no fake smiles. We've been following Lunaris's regional patterns, especially the recent 20% bump in your metro rollouts. That's why you're here, Elise. She didn't say Miles's name, because she already knew. We sat for nearly 2 hours. She asked me everything, about how I'd built the pricing elasticity matrix, how I used behavioral clustering to segment seasonal buyers, and how I connected inventory cycles to micro-campaign timing. She wasn't impressed with my resume. She was impressed with my thinking. We don't want just good analysts, she said. We want the ones actually pulling the levers behind the curtain. By the end of the interview, she slid a folder across the table. We're prepared to offer you a senior strategic analyst role, executive track, $30K above your current base, and a budget line for your own team, if you're ready to build something here. I didn't even blink. When do you need me? Soon, she smiled. We have competitors to overtake. That evening, I typed up my resignation letter. Short, direct, no drama. Just a quiet ending to a chapter that had already written its own exit. I handed it to Brett the next morning. He looked surprised, then annoyed, then performatively concerned. You're making a mistake, Elise. Nexa is still unproven in this market. So was I replied, until someone finally gave me credit. Miles tried to corner me in the break room. Wait, you're leaving? Elise, we were just getting into our rhythm. I looked at him the way you look at an empty hallway. You should probably start building your own. He didn't laugh, because he finally realized the script was gone. My last 2 weeks at Lunaris Retail Systems were a masterclass in watching a system collapse on its own. The moment I stopped feeding data into Miles's presentations, everything began to unravel. His confident tone stayed the same, but the substance underneath vanished like fog under sunlight. His next rollout pitch? All surface, no depth. Charts without causality, buzzwords without weight. I heard from 2 department heads, indirectly of course, that Brett had begun taking a closer look at Miles's methodology. And I knew exactly what they'd find. A hollow framework held together with borrowed slides and stolen phrasing. On my final Friday, I got an unexpected knock at my cubicle. It was Brianna, one of the senior pricing analysts. Smart, observant. Underestimated. She leaned in close and whispered, Everyone knows what happened, Elise. People saw what was real. They just couldn't say anything. I nodded. I didn't need a revolution. I just needed results. 2 weeks later, I walked into Nexa Core Markets as their newest senior strategic analyst, reporting directly to Director Rayner. The difference was immediate. Meetings were built around data, not ego. Contributions were credited openly. And within my first month, I had my own junior analyst to mentor. But that wasn't the best part. The best part came when I started working on Nexa's supplier partnership optimization project, a deep dive into which retail chains were burning bridges with their vendors. And why? And there it was. A confidential memo shared by one of Nexa's sourcing partners, Bright Hollow Labs, a premium home goods supplier that had been providing exclusive lines to Lunaris for over a decade, was actively shopping for a new retail partner. Reason stated, dissatisfaction with strategic execution. Misalignment between merchandising vision and actual consumer behavior analysis. In other words, they had Miles's version of my strategy, and it was falling apart. I didn't gloat. I documented, and then I drafted a proposal, backed by hard data, explaining how Nexa could seize the partnership, optimize distribution, and showcase Bright Hollow's products through a segmentation model that, frankly, I had invented at Lunaris. The proposal was approved in under a week, and the call to Bright Hollow was placed the following Tuesday. The call with Patricia Weatherby, Director of Business Development at Bright Hollow Labs, lasted 42 minutes. It should have been just an introduction, a routine vendor pitch. Instead, it became the tipping point. From the moment she answered, Patricia was polite but distant. I could tell she'd sat through dozens of these calls. But when I began walking her through Nexa's data-led approach, how we tracked seasonal demand clusters, how we modeled replenishment cycles based on micro-regional analytics, her tone changed. She interrupted. Wait, that customer segmentation? That sounds familiar. Didn't Lunaris attempt something like that recently? I smiled lightly. They tried, but execution matters. A pause, then laughter. You worked there, didn't you? Until recently, I replied. I thought so. The rest of the call flowed easily. I didn't trash Lunaris. I didn't have to. Bright Hollow had already seen enough. Their seasonal inventory was mismanaged. Campaigns were mistimed, and their premium collections were being drowned under generic promotions. We've been considering a shift, Patricia admitted, but we needed to know someone on the other end understood why our product positioning matters. She understood I did. By the end of the call, she scheduled a formal pitch meeting with her full executive team. 3 weeks later, the deal was signed. Nexacore Markets secured exclusive distribution rights for Bright Hollow Labs Premium seasonal lines. The retail industry noticed immediately. The headlines rolled in. Bright Hollow cuts, ties with Lunaris, after strategic missteps. Nexa snags major supplier from rival retailer. Analytic precision wins. Bright Hollow switches sides. But what the headlines didn't say, what only a few people inside Lunaris truly understood, was that the strategy that sealed that deal was born long before Miles ever got his promotion, from a quiet cubicle, from a woman who'd been told she lacked strategic vision. From me. I didn't need to read the internal memos at Lunaris to know what was happening. I could hear it in the industry buzz. I could see it in the quarterly reports. And I could feel it in the sudden silence. Bright Hollow's departure had been a seismic blow, bigger than even I anticipated. Their product line accounted for nearly 15% of Lunaris's seasonal revenue. And without exclusive access, they were scrambling to find substitutes that didn't exist. I knew what would come next: costlier suppliers, weaker margins, botched rollouts, and worst of all, panic. It didn't take long, a week after the Bright Hollow deal was announced, I received a message, discreet, through a mutual contact. Director Brett Hamilton wanted to catch up. I met him at a neutral coffee shop across town. He wore the same tailored suit, but his voice was smaller, measured, almost cautious. "You're doing well," he said, stirring his coffee but not drinking it. I nodded politely. "Nex has given me room to think freely. It's been productive." He leaned in slightly, elbows on the table. "Look, let's not pretend we both don't know what happened. The Bright Hollow deal, it hurt. I won't lie." I raised an eyebrow. "Then maybe don't pretend you didn't know where that strategy came from." A pause. Then he smiled. Tight, insincere. "That's why I wanted to meet. We may have misjudged the situation. And I'll be honest, Miles is struggling. His numbers aren't adding up. The board's asking questions." I waited. "Would you consider coming back? Senior director title, your own team, autonomy." For a moment, I considered it. The recognition, the power, the chance to rewrite the rules from inside. But then I remembered how I sat in that conference room, watching my work repackaged and applauded under someone else's name. How I had to prove my value by leaving. How they had never offered me that seat until I made them feel the loss. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and left him with one sentence. Strategic thinking doesn't wait for permission. It builds its own table. My second quarter at Nexa was the most fulfilling stretch of my professional life. The Bright Hollow rollout shattered expectations. 18% over projected revenue in just 10 weeks. Our customer satisfaction metrics climbed. Inventory turnover improved. Every dashboard I monitored told the same story. Strategy wins when it's done right. Director Rayner called it textbook disruption. I called it justice. Meanwhile, at Lunaris, the decline was no longer a whisper. It was a siren. Internal leaks, frustrated vendors, anonymous Glassdoor reviews exposing incompetence at the top. Miles' name was everywhere, but never in a good way. Bethany, my old colleague, messaged me discreetly. "They're reviewing his promotion now. The board's involved. Brett's distancing himself." And then, the moment I didn't expect, a LinkedIn message from Miles himself. "Hey Elise, I've been reflecting. Would love your advice sometime on how to build real strategic frameworks. Maybe we could collaborate? Hope you're well." I stared at the message. No apology, no ownership, just opportunism. I didn't respond. Because by then, my work had already responded for me. 8 months after I left Lunaris, I walked into Nexa's annual strategy summit as one of their most valuable leads. My team had grown to 6 analysts. I was presenting a new market entry, plan into 3 states where Lunaris once dominated. This time, I took the stage. I clicked the remote. I owned the screen, and every chart, every insight, every win, carried one name at the bottom: Elise Monroe. So let me ask you, have you ever had your idea stolen? Watched someone else get credit while you were told to stay silent? What did you do? Did you walk away or build something better? Drop your story in the comments, because maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs your story to believe in their own. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't rage, it's results.